Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to the episode of the Kansai Kollective. It's Ace Questberry today, joined with C.C of, what's the restaurant?
Bistro New Orleans.
Bistro New Orleans, the best Cajun, New Orleans, Creole food you can get in Osaka. We cover everything from a little bit of history on Cajun food, what it's like getting a business started and running for a decade here in Osaka, and all the benefits that it brought. So we'll tune in and see you guys soon.
Kansai Kollective. West side of Japan, we out here coolin', Zane and Nessa got connections. We know you got questions. Ain't no need to worry.
Welcome to the Kansai Collective. I'm Ace Questberry, host. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I just punched the mic. Zane, how you feeling this morning, brother?
Now that you punched the mic, I'm a little hurt. But besides that,
a little hurt?
It's a good day.
Why?
So, summer's coming to an end. It's not so hot. I love fall. It's Friday, so the weekend is here. And there's always something to do.
Not bad. See, I asked Zane earlier that I said what he's grateful for, and he's like, I don't know, man, I'm alive. So I'm happy that it's...
I definitely didn't say I didn't know. Like, so, do you see how you just framed it? So you can make me look like an asshole?
I like the self-censorship. The self-censorship was
That's
intense,
what we do.
Man.
We don't curse on Kansai Collective.
We're upstanding gentlemen. But enough about us. Good sir. Welcome. Welcome. Go ahead, introduce yourself to the audience, brother.
Hi, my name's C.C Haydel. I am the owner and executive chef of Bistro New Orleans.
Wow, you practiced that. And not just for this, but I'm saying, like, you know what I'm saying?
With a mic in front of my face. Yeah.
Executive chef and owner of Bistro New Orleans. And I'm guessing...
I like executive. That sounds very...
Just means I'm the chef in charge. That's
right, of course. Right. Now, sous chef is like the assistant, right?
Yes.
Okay, because I know nothing about it.
You can have a head chef, too, but the executive chef outranks the head chef.
Okay. You're the head chef, but you also pay the bills.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's the difference.
Right.
That's the difference maker right there.
I feel like would the executive chef not really cook at that point, but just really oversee?
In many cases, yes.
Yeah.
If they're...
Perfect
Well,
world.
you can have head chef and executive chef, which really I'm both. At this point, but I do have assistants that do most of the cooking in the evening.
That's crazy.
But all the recipes and are mine.
Menus, everything comes from you.
Right.
Well, excellent. CC, thank you for joining us, man. Guys, as always, if you're tuning in for the first time, thank you for tuning in to an episode of the Kansai Collective. You've been here since the very beginning. We appreciate all the support. If you guys want more behind-the-scenes content, check out our Patreon. And a big thank you to all of our sponsors, such as The Deck, Wilderness, Hinomaru, DroneX, Skyscape. Little hint, teaser, what's coming soon. But yeah, we got a lot going on.
I can't top that. That is just too good.
Like you said, man, it's not our first time saying this. We're on what episode?
I would say that is Asa's strong point. Is yeah, just going off the cusp.
Well, good thing we have
going
a podcast.
Off the cusp. All right, CC. Actually, I'm really interested. We're gonna go a little deeper.
Sure.
We're not gonna warm up.
Just jump right in.
Just jump right
Jumping in raw.
I'm curious, what is like a chef? Because I already know what your background is, but what would you define as a chef?
That's a good question.
Is it a good question?
No, it is because, I mean, technically, you know, if you want to be stuffy about it, it's like, it would be like professor, where you would assume that a professor has a doctorate of some sort. But as far as chefs go, that's not necessarily true.
Right.
Most chefs that you see on television and what have you have gone to some sort of cooking school and have some sort of diploma, degree, what have you. But there are others who've been lifelong cooks and then have become, have run their own places. There's one place in New Orleans in particular, a woman named Leah Chase, who's passed away some time ago, and well, not too long ago actually. But she started the restaurant as just she just learned to cook at home, and then she opened a restaurant with her husband. And after 20 or 30 years, people would say she's a chef, and she would say, well, no, I didn't go to cooking school. But it's one of the most famous restaurants in New Orleans.
Right.
And where would you place yourself on that spectrum?
Well, I'm self-taught.
Okay, right.
So I didn't do a lot of cooking at home because my mother didn't want me in her kitchen.
Hold on. What?
You're
what,
exiled.
What did she cook really well?
My mom made a
First
lot
thing
of
that comes to mind. Yeah.
My mom made a lot of the fancy New Orleans dishes, but she didn't make any of the ones that you hear about. So my mom didn't make jambalaya. She didn't make gumbo. Her mom made gumbo, but my mom would make all the fancy stuff.
The fancy.
Like the oyster stew, which I make. When she found out that I made the oyster stew, and she said, "Well, son, you never." I said, "No, Ma, I didn't ask you for the recipe because I know what it tastes like, and I'm good at this now." Okay. So
I've got a little bit of pedigree myself.
Right.
So okay.
All right. So you said you're self-taught, and how long you didn't cook at your own?
Not really growing up.
Yeah.
I did when my mom and dad weren't home.
and because what I find is interesting, like for me, like I like to cook now quite a bit, but my cooking all started like just as like a poor university student, where I suddenly realized like, oh, actually, money goes a lot faster than you think. You can't
Right.
you can't eat out all the
That's
time.
interesting.
Right?
Usually,
that's-
black people, their parents make them cook. My mom made me cook when I was very young.
Well, I come from like a super poor white household, so it was like no one knew how to cook at all. Like my mom was a waitress, worked all night. My dad was a
Yeah.
construction worker, worked all day. So it was like,
That doesn't lend itself to
any
sort of kind of
there's no cooking time, and we just grew up like I remember like for example, I used to think spinach was like the devil because I only knew like canned nasty
that's
spinach,
some
right? That they
awful
would just
stuff.
drop on your plate
Yeah.
and they're like, you eat it.
dang.
And then I remember when I started cooking in university, like, even raw spinach alone is infinitely times better.
Yeah, it is.
But for me, it was in university. So you started at home and then weren't allowed to cook, though. in your
Not
mom's
really.
kitchen.
No, my mom didn't want me in her kitchen. But that's the case for, funny enough, a lot of Creole mothers in New Orleans. And we'll talk about those distinctions a little bit later. I think that'll come up. But I guess I started cooking more. I left college before graduating. I ended up going back. But then I did cook more for myself because I was a poor non-student without a degree.
Poor young person,
I was
right?
a bank teller, right. I lived out of town. I had these roommates, and I realized that I would have to learn how to shop and
Got to be an adult now.
yeah, right. So, but I always did kind of want to, and I took to it. And then when I started doing better, I went back, and then when I started my professional career as a teacher, I was an English teacher, high school English, and if I wanted New Orleans food, I would have to cook it. Right. Outside of New Orleans.
You weren't going to get it.
No,
So
even in New York City, which I find
You can get a lot of
really,
things in
really-
New York, but apparently not gumbo, right?
that was really, really
I don't-
interesting. I could get
yeah,
some great
Southern
Ethiopian
food,
food, but I can't get any New Orleans food.
Oh, that is
none,
very
none.
interesting. What I'm like listening to you right now, it seems like you have really a love for New Orleans. Like, what is that about? Like, it's just, you got the New Orleans hat on. You're like
Right.
New Orleans food. Is there some type of culture down there? Like,
Yeah. Right. Actually, do you all know who Anthony Bourdain is?
I do know who Anthony Bourdain
Okay,
is.
so they asked Anthony Bourdain where he could get the best food. And that's almost an impossible question to answer, because,
Man's been everywhere.
well, right. And it's impossible for really anyone to answer because there's tastes and there's whatever. You have food capitals. And he thought about it for a minute and he said, well, I can't say it's the best because you just can't say what's the best. He says, but if I go to Brussels, if I go to Paris, if I go to London, if I go to New York City, if I go to Chicago, I can get some regional things, but they all do these things, and I can get a great steak in any of those cities. He says, but I'll have to say New Orleans because I can't get that cuisine outside of
Anywhere
the region.
else.
He goes, people try, and I can tell you from experience, most of them fail very badly.
Right. Just
And I don't know why. I mean, I used to make them in my kitchens in Los Angeles, in New York, in Charlotte, North Carolina. I just find the ingredients and I do it, and people were like, well, how come I can't get this at a restaurant? I'm still a little flabbergasted.
Just doesn't scale. You just can't get it out of there.
Well, I think people aren't familiar enough with it to really understand.
Right.
So in that regard, it's unique. Now, is it the best?
I love New Orleans food.
I mean, yeah, it's a great place, and it's got great music and great food and great drinks, but
they get naked. People get naked. Well, girls take off their shirts.
Okay, getting a little explicit with the. I think that's like
only ladies from out of town.
Only
Oh, word.
Those aren't the New Orleans
drunk
girls.
college students.
Yes,
Yeah,
the
let me
Mardi
clear
Gras.
this up.
Yeah.
Right, that's drunk.
The girls
college
from New Orleans
students.
are a little bit more classy.
Yeah, they know better. I've never seen anybody I grew up with take off their shirt for some beads.
Some beads is the best
Right.
part.
That's
If you don't
America,
if
dog.
you're
That's
not
so cool.
if you're not an American, you don't know. In New Orleans, they have the Mardi Gras festival every year, which is it's just a big party on Bourbon Street, and drinks, parades, all
the
that
whole
good
fucking
stuff.
city.
Yeah,
Did
I'm
you-
not supposed to say that
bro.
word.
Did you see when you was a kid and like it was nighttime, you wake up in the middle of the night, it's like
Girls
12.
Gone Wild episodes.
Yes,
It's always New Orleans. It's always New Orleans.
Yes, it was.
But what's jump back to a better topic. No, because I wanted to touch on something that Zane had where he's talking about, representing New Orleans. What I find interesting is with a lot of foreigners when they come to Japan, they tend to like forget about and or reject a lot of where they're from.
Right.
I think there's a lot of, people come to Japan, a lot of like escapism type
Yeah.
sense.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's interesting to see that, here we are in Osaka and you're still, Saints cap on, still representing New Orleans to the point that you have your own restaurant based off of it. So in your sense, for you, is it just natural to keep that, kind of representation or why not reject it like some of the other people we find
Good
out
question. I think that people in New Orleans understand that it's a unique place. It's got a bunch of nicknames. And some of them really old-fashioned, like the city that care forgot. Some new ones, you've heard of the Big Easy. It's also called the northernmost Caribbean island, which that's not an island, but
Makes sense. Yeah.
There's a lot of influence from there, and I think that people from New Orleans aren't worried about whether or not they're better than anyone else. They do comment on whether or not somebody else is. How they might evaluate our culture, or how they might, kind of sniff. For instance, New Orleans has always been the queen city of the South. Always. There have been other king cities, during the Civil War. There's always Birmingham and then Richmond, Virginia. Burned to the ground. Good. Good.
Sorry, I didn't know it's from
Richmond.
Richmond.
And now Atlanta. And those were always king cities, and New Orleans never cared about that. We have a culture. People are welcome to come to it. We're not shutting anyone off. If people want to become New Orleanians, they can come to New Orleans and they can become a New Orleanian. And they can bring something new if they'd like, as long as they understand where it all came from. So if I go to New York and someone says, this is the chef's take on gumbo, and I'm like, well, does the chef make regular gumbo? Has the chef ever made gumbo without
the chef's take?
Right. And so those kinds of things are important to people from New Orleans. So we're fine celebrating our culture because we're not pushing it on anybody.
Just wholly who you are.
Yeah.
Question. If you are unfamiliar with New Orleans, and you're maybe not even from America, and you are interested in trying some New Orleans,
Cuisine.
classic food, what would you recommend someone to eat if they've never had
Gumbo?
Gumbo is the best.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Gumbo.
Such a good choice too.
And it's iconic. Most people don't realize that there are. It's gumbo in and of itself there's two basic kinds of gumbo growing up. There's the okra gumbo, and there's a filet gumbo.
Okra and filet gumbo.
So okra is the spring and summer gumbo because
Wow.
now I
some
serve that year round
Japanese.
because I can't get filet here, which are dried sassafras leaves. You never mix them. And the ingredients tend to vary. So I'm going to veer off just for a hot second and tell you that there's a difference between Cajun and Creole, although they're closely related.
So for anyone following, like, because I think this, because also taking into consideration that a lot of people that follow aren't from the U.S. Like,
Right.
Louisiana can be described as Cajun culture often, right?
Yes.
That's
yes.
they're-
Southern Louisiana.
People are referred to as Cajun culture, Cajun cooking. But
Right.
you're saying that not only Cajun, you also have Creole culture,
Right,
which is
which
just
is-
as important.
Absolutely. In fact, that was the initial thing coming out of New Orleans, because that was a more cityfied, a little more. I hesitate to use the word sophisticated, but I mean it in the sense of, it's the English teacher talking, more in the sense of things that tend to be a little more complicated. Cajun cooking tends to be a little more rustic. It's not as spicy as people think it might be, but it tends to be a little more simple and straightforward. Whereas Creole cooking might have more sauces, more ingredients, things like that. So, for instance, a Creole jambalaya almost always has tomatoes in it, and will have a mix. Cajun jambalaya does not have tomatoes. It's the difference between what we call the red and the brown. As far as gumbo goes, Creole gumbos tend to have meat and seafood in them. They tend to always have a mix with that. Whereas Cajun gumbos are either meat or seafood.
It's distinct.
Yes.
Oh man, I feel like I'm getting. I love gumbo, but I've never actually like spoken to someone from Louisiana about like up until this I had no idea there was even a
And if
difference.
someone tells you that gumbo is tomato based,
Ask them where is it? Creole or
no,
Cajun?
tell them that you're not front. No, it is never tomato based ever.
Okay, so that's like the way you can catch like a on the spot.
Yeah. Oh, you can
A
say
bull
that. I can
who?
say that word.
I said
Can I
a
say that
bull's
word?
hitter. A
Yeah.
bull's hitter is that's a new phrase.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I could say that word. So,
No, you
I
can't.
can't say that
Sorry,
word. Okay.
sorry, Zay. We're also getting some Aaron's watching the clips with us right now. He's like, "I'm gonna kill you guys."
Yo, so I
Super
wanna,
deep
I
background
think
on
it's
Cajun
super
cooking.
cool, like that
Right.
you're doing all this. I wanna touch on your story because I think it's inspirational and people need to hear more of these type
Tell
of things.
us.
So, you own your own shop here in
Yes.
Osaka.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Let's touch on how it was for you to start your business here as a foreigner, and what people don't know is you have been surviving. Well, I wouldn't survive. You have held your business for how many years?
It'll be 10 years in November.
10 years of business.
10 years.
Big
That's-
round of
yeah.
applause to that
This is the
because
hardest
the
thing I've
first
ever done.
Anybody who owns a business,
business or the podcast.
Right.
The business.
Thank you.
anyone who owns a business knows you can get to 10 years of continuing with,
doubt.
a business. Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah, congrats, my boy.
So how long have you been? I mean, first, how long have you been in Japan?
2009. So it's been 13 now, right? Yeah.
So did
Yeah.
3 years, and then you're like, all right, time to bring some Cajun love.
Well, believe it or not, it grew out of a frustration. I mean, I'm a high school English teacher. I have a master's degree in English education. And I came here to teach English. My wife is Japanese. She was doing an advanced law degree in New York where I was working. And she says, well, I'm going back. And I helped her edit her law school papers. And she said, well, they could really use an English teacher like you. And there's a difference between really can use and do we want him? Right. Which I found out, right.
It's always a girl.
It's always a girl.
man.
It's always a
Anytime
girl.
you move across the world, it's always a
Right.
female, usually.
So, I held down some part-time jobs, but, I'm an experienced person. I'm not a recent college graduate, so I was too old for JET, and I was overqualified for the AIKAIWAs, and the universities weren't hiring natives anymore because they failed to vet the people that they did hire full-time.
Because you came over here with a master's degree
Oh,
already.
yeah. And 20 years of
overqualified.
experience teaching English.
Just so overqualified. I don't know how you say that in Japanese, but that would be it.
Well, it was kind of weird too, because even my wife, who's an academic, I mean, she's got an MBA and 2 law degrees. So she was like, "Well, I don't understand. I can't believe this," but
Like on paper, it looks like a very good fit.
right, looks like an excellent fit.
Sorewa Japan.
Yeah. So I got frustrated, and I wasn't sure what to do, and I started having these. I called them tasting parties. I knew people who had restaurants and bars, and I would use Facebook mostly because 10 years ago that was the preferred. And so I made a group, and I would announce these tasting parties, and I would make a lot of stuff at home, and then I'd go to these businesses where I knew the owners. They were either an off day or a slow week or what have you, and I would serve my food to see what the response was. And
Look at that. I just got to step in real quick, see. Sorry
Sure.
for interrupting, man. Hustle. Somebody, Aaron, get the camera to zoom in into my face. Hustle. You feel me? He's from another country going into these businesses and then asking somehow how he can get himself in there to serve his food and then throw parties. You feel me? Like, what? You kidding me?
What was the initial, like, what was some of that initial feedback with that? Because I think that takes a lot, like even just putting yourself out there, and like Zane said, just going up to some of these people and be like, hey, we've got, I mean, how many other New Orleans bistros are in Osaka, right? So I think, because not only are you trying your own food, but you're also probably at that time introducing something very unique in a lot of these places.
Absolutely. Even in the States, it would be unique almost anywhere. And, I just talked to a couple of friends. A very, very good friend of mine is a chef. And I made a couple of things at home, and he was very pleasantly surprised. He was also really happy that he could speak to someone about food sometimes. So I'd visit his restaurant because it was around the corner from where I lived. And ironically, I used to live across the street from my restaurant. So I was in that neighborhood to start with. And he said, this is really, really good. And I knew him. He's a professional chef. And kind of like me, he went to cooking school at Cordon Bleu in Paris.
Japanese guy?
No, he's half Indian, half Dutch.
Okay. Based in Osaka?
Yeah, his name's Bunny.
Wow.
Anybody
Food capital of Japan.
Right.
Check out Bunny or check out CC.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Bunny was always very straight about what he liked and what he didn't like. And he offered some advice. And we became very, very good friends, which we still are. And
Fire.
I wouldn't be open if it wasn't for him. I didn't know how to price,
Meals
dishes and
or
stuff.
things
Yeah,
like
yeah, I
that,
didn't know how to
right.
do that.
So you learned that all on the run.
All on the run. How to source ingredients. He helped with that. But then again, sometimes I just had to go out and, finding Western
Wing it.
ingredients.
Just
it
wing
would be, yeah. Because, when we say green peppers, we mean, ones that are about that big.
Bell peppers, right?
Yeah. All the bell peppers here.
They're talking about like the
you gotta
pimo.
be kidding me. Yeah. Right.
So because that was an interesting question, because like my whole thing was from the Japanese side. I mean, the benefit we have here in Osaka is Osaka is the food capital of this country. Like you get, especially when you get in, you start learning the local spots. I mean, there's so much variety you can get in the city. But how do you find the reaction from a lot of your like first time Japanese customers? Because I imagine it's probably their first time trying any type of Cajun or Creole food.
Absolutely. Interestingly enough, so the first Japanese customers that I had were these older gentlemen, and because we would use gurunabi at first, which was a kind of like Tabilog now, where it's a restaurant site, but gurunabi was I realized was geared more to older folks, and so literally quite a few times I'd have an old Japanese man, maybe in his late 50s to early 70s, and they'd come in and they'd say, I remember New Orleans. Do you have gumbo? And they would sit down at the counter or at a table, and they'd eat the gumbo, and they'd literally go back in their minds.
Flashback.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, I can see
That's
it.
fire. The food
I'm
is,
like,
is
right,
a
yeah,
time
I know what
travel
revelry
machine.
looks like, right. Plus, being an English teacher, I tell when students aren't paying attention, I'm like, you are not here.
Right. They're flashing back to their early 20 days. They're like, America was great. Yeah.
Right. And they said, oh, man, I remember. The taste, I remember. It brings it back. And I didn't really expect that at all. Because a lot of the older Japanese men, someone asked me, they go, well, who are you going to market to? And I said, well, I'll tell you who I'm not going to market to. I'm not going to market to these Japanese businessmen, particularly the older ones that like to go to izakayas. If they want to come, that's fine. But I'm not going to
It's not your
target
market,
them.
Yeah. Right.
Because that's...
They like a specific...
Right.
This.
Somebody has to drag them there. And then my shop is... It looks quaint. You can see inside from outside. And it's what we would call back home a garden view, which means almost the first floor. Right? Yeah. Not the basement, but not the first floor. So I'd get people walking by, and they'd look in, and they'd see this, they'd see this restaurant, and then they'd come back in. A lot of Japanese women who wanted to try something new. Sometimes it was a date, and so you can tell they're dragging this guy who doesn't know anything about the food. And I'd get some of that. I still do. I still do. And then people from my region and from Louisiana and New Orleans in specifically, they would come and they'd say, "This tastes like home."
So look, let's get into some nitty gritty.
Sure.
You've been in business for 10 years.
Yeah.
As a foreigner in Japan,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
with food that is not
Japanese.
normal to Japanese and foreigners. What were some problems that you had to go through?
The struggle,
Yeah.
Well, sourcing ingredients can be, and the COVID doesn't help. War doesn't help.
War and COVID definitely do not help anything.
Right, it's just killing me lately. There are very, very few places where I can get some of my ingredients, and then when I find that, this company's not making this anymore, then now I'm scrambling to see, what's an acceptable substitute? Because there are things that I won't do simply because I can't get the ingredients to make it taste authentic.
Right.
And I'm not going to serve a knockoff.
Right.
No. I have professional pride and...
Well, with the struggles as well, question.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, because what I find with a lot of foreign cuisine in Japan is we talk about this with curry a lot. Like it's like Japanified,
Right.
Yeah.
right? Like they dull it down to what is
Right.
accepted by Japanese standards.
Right.
Do you do that?
Not at all.
Not at all. Nice.
Won't do it. Decided, it was never an option.
That would defeat the purpose, I feel like, if
Right.
you dulled it down.
I remember visiting other places, even in the States, or I've been in the Caribbean and stuff like that, and I would look at people and I go, I want to know where you go. I don't want to go to the tourist spot.
Right, same.
I'm from a tourist city. I know where they take out-of-town tourists to have watered-down versions of New Orleans food. And everybody in New Orleans was, I'm not going over there. And I lived in New York multiple times, and I knew where to go and where not to go.
Facts.
There was an Ethiopian restaurant across the street from my dorm in graduate school, and I knew it was legit because it was full of Ethiopians and it had an Ethiopian staff.
Yeah, I would say like in Osaka, the places you don't go that Asa likes is like Torikizoku. Like, why would I go? Why would I go there?
What?
Right.
Nah.
What a shot, man! What a shot! First of all, there's nothing wrong with Torikizoku at all.
You recommended
You don't go to
Torikizoku.
Torikizoku because you want. You go to Torikizoku because you want to get drunk cheap.
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
And eat cheap chicken.
Okay, that's the
Right.
only reason.
That's all it is.
I'm not taking. First of all, ladies, if you're visiting Japan and a guy wants to take you to Torikizoku for the first
Yeah,
date,
dump him.
that's a huge red flag.
Yeah, that's a red flag.
Second date, it's fine.
Flag on the play.
Once
Right.
you've already had some progress, Torikizoku
Right.
is fine.
You know
but-
what? We're counting. We're kind of pinching pennies here. So we can we go?
Yeah, exactly.
And if
that's okay.
That's okay.
First
But-
date, Torikizoku.
No, yeah,
Not
right.
the
Yeah,
look,
that's
not
that's
the
a
look.
yeah,
Man,
that's a
Zane,
mistake.
what a shot!
That's
so
a
tell me,
shot.
so where do you go, Mister?
I would
Fancy?
rather hit an izakaya, but
You
it has to
only
be a
eat
local.
lettuce. So where do you get food at? Because that's what I want to know. You're telling me
Why
you know all
is
the
Aaron
spots.
like dying from that joke, bro?
Because you got the guy that is like can't eat half the things on the ingredient, telling me
But yeah, I don't know
That's
what can you eat at
true.
Torikizoku? French fries.
chicken.
Yeah, French fries. French fries at a normal, izakaya. French fries are go-to.
So
Japanese
where do you
French fries
go
are really
to?
good.
Man? I'm curious. You
I
got a
go to
date. You
vegan
got a date.
spots.
Other than the Planet, the one place that you take me all the time. What's the name of that spot?
which one?
The
Green Earth.
Green Earth. Yes.
I like things that are green, and I love earth.
Check it out.
But also, falafel sababa is cool.
Falafel Sababa. That's a good spot for sure.
Yeah, it's just quick.
So there's a couple ones.
Yeah,
so,
there's a couple, man.
You didn't come in and try my falafel.
I have not.
I made a red bean falafel.
So that was my question.
that
Where
sounds
is your
good.
shop located at?
So my shop
Which
is
area?
in Kita-Horie.
Oh, Kita-Horie.
Yes.
Oh,
So-
you
Very
must
nice
be. You must
area.
be. I was gonna say you must be doing. If you've been in business 10 years and you're located anywhere near Horie, you're probably doing.
No, I'm right there. In fact,
Were
I
you
used to
always
live-
in Horie?
Yeah.
You just piqued
this-
Ace's interest.
It was
Horie is nice,
it was
man.
this little cafe, and it was across the street from where we lived previously. And I was just frustrated, and I was walking, and I talked to my wife, and she says, "Okay, why don't you start looking for places?" And this place across the street was a cafe, and I'd bet, and I don't gamble, which is good because I drink too much, but but I'm from New Orleans. Yeah, that's not the only excuse,
It makes
but
sense,
it's a
makes
good
sense.
one, yeah. But I think that the owner there was in Horie. I had gone down there once. He covered up those beautiful windows, which I understand is a Japanese thing, and if you go to a traditional Japanese restaurant, you really can't see inside. And there was the walls were painted white, and they were cracking, and there was a bad poem on the wall, and
Not the good vibes we want.
right, and then the furniture was was plastic, and I think that what a lot of people do is hope that, well, I'll open in this nice neighborhood and I'll have a cafe, and then because it's Horie, it'll come, and then I'll make
Status.
some money,
Status.
and then I can invest
Improve
it back
right,
in.
Right.
That that works on TV, on the movies, and and those nice stories, but that's not always. That you can't count on that kind of a thing. That's why those stories are feel good.
Like for people that don't
Feel
know,
good,
like
that's
if you're in
true.
Osaka, like Osaka gets a lot of hate as being like the dirtier city in Japan, like the more rough city. But the Horie area is quite fancy these days, especially Minami Horie, South Horie, and Kita Horie as well is rather like I don't want to say high class, but it's rather
They got
trendy.
gentrified.
Quite a bit, yes.
Yeah.
Because that was my second question: is when you moved into the Horie area of your restaurant compared to now, how much has it changed? Because these days Horie is like
Right.
absurdly expensive.
Yeah. So we started just before it started to get real expensive, which is why when I've had the opportunity to move locations, I'm like, you know what? It's got to be a whole lot better than this. It's got to be and I've never found a place that's a whole lot better. And, we spent the money. My wife spent the money.
To say the
To,
law wife.
The floor was concrete. We put down a floor. We changed all the furniture. We took out a loan to do all of that to make sure that when people came in, it was acceptable. It wasn't going to be, well, okay, we're going to cut corners here until we make some money. It just, it didn't have most proper restaurants have what they call a grease trap.
Right.
It didn't have that.
So you had to install all that.
All
brand
of
new.
that. Even
Oh,
it
man,
didn't have a proper
renovation.
stove or oven.
And
None of that. He
plastic
just
furniture.
cooked on hot plates and burners and
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it was yeah.
So it sounds like it's come a long way.
It has. It
Quite a bit.
has.
I would say, like with the Japanese environment, it's much different to running a business out here. So, like, what do you think were some key points that kept you in business for 10
Ooh, very
years
good
as a
question.
foreigner, hustling, starting from your friends' restaurants, and throwing parties,
Tasting parties.
tasting parties?
Well, yeah, the tasting parties took off and people showed an interest. There were even a few times when people said, "Hey, that sausage patty that you made, can you just sell me some of those frozen?"
Can you make me a bento of that, please?
Right? Yeah.
Yo,
then-
that's a idea, bro. I'm sorry, I'm keep cutting you off. I love you, CC, but yo, you could do New Orleans bento boxes, boy. I'm sorry, I can't express all that on the podcast.
Secret to become. Check out the Patreon for more details on
Right.
on the New Orleans bentos. So you got the interest. People start validating you. They're like,
Right.
"Hey, man, I will pay you for this."
Right,
And is that the
right.
moment that it clicked, where you're like,
I said, all right, well, I'm gonna give this a shot. And so while they were doing the construction and during the, I opened in November, so I was still teaching. So I would go to my job, my English job in the morning, and so by the end of that semester, I was done. You know, by the end of that school year, I was done, and I just jumped into it. And in the beginning, I did almost everything.
of course, as it goes, right?
Right. So yeah. In fact, I didn't know which day I wanted to be closed. I'm closed on Tuesdays, and interestingly enough, I said, okay, well, I'll open and see how the flow goes, and then I'll decide what day to close. So 2 weeks pass, 3 weeks pass. After 3 weeks, I said, okay, well, I'll close on a Tuesday. I said, okay, I'll close on Tuesday. And so the next Tuesday I was going to be closed, and I remember it was Sunday night, and it was a busy weekend. I was looking forward to Tuesday, and I was so tired that after everybody left, I said goodnight, and my staff left, and I looked across the street through the window at my apartment building, and I went to sleep on the floor of my restaurant.
No.
I just didn't even walk
You're
across
just like,
the street.
yeah, no point. I'm just
I was just sleep right here, and I used my backpack as a pillow, and my wife was like, "What are you doing?" I'm like,
Standard.
I didn't
small
want to walk
business
across the
owner.
street. I've been working for almost a month straight, every day, in the morning, from the morning to 11 o'clock at night.
Right, prepping everything,
Oh.
sourcing, buying,
Right,
shopping.
yeah.
Restaurants are intense, man. Have you ever worked in a restaurant? I've worked in a couple restaurants.
I don't
Restaurants
think
are
so.
prep work alone is obnoxious. So I can
Yeah,
imagine doing
it
that.
can be, yeah.
Especially having to source everything yourself. Like, I mean, when you're doing it at a standard restaurant, you know, you're not worrying about sourcing and all, right? It's there.
Okay. Also, just because I think it's cool,
Tell us.
you have a business, your own business, your restaurant business, but you also do something else on the side.
With a voice like that, you bet your bottom dollar he does.
Thank you for telling us, Asa, about CC, even though we have him right here. Yeah.
No, I do voice work mostly. Yeah,
Come again one more time?
I do voice work mostly, corporate profiles. So,
Give us an example.
Okay. I wish I have a script in my bag. So believe it or not.
So corporate profiles, is this like you're introducing businesses, or is this like business technique?
So it
or...
would be. It could be either or. Usually it's a product or a service. So a lot of times it'll be a company where it says, okay, well, we have a new company profile. So my agent, says, okay, we want that guy. And so, for instance, I did one, for a place called Daiso Chemicals was one of my first ones.
Okay.
And, especially the chemical companies and the technical companies,
You sound very
they hire
professional.
me a lot. Yeah. It's funny, though, because I get to the studio and they say, can he say the words? Because there's chemical stuff and,
like, yes, I can-
chlorofluorobenzene.
I
I
can
can say
read, yes.
chlorofluorobenzene. Yeah.
Chlorofluorobenzene, 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 chlorofluorobenzene.
Our users,
Yeah, I can
our,
see
our,
that.
listener, our listeners are
Swag.
going to love that little tidbit. Put that out. We need like a soundboard of just different Zane sounds.
Chlorofluorobenzene.
And just hit the button for chlorofluorobenzene anytime. So I'll keep it simple. We got a new mug. Please,
like the mug.
Please
Oh.
introduce us. The
So
mug.
for the mug,
Give for the
Yeah,
people
just
at
a
home.
little sample, bro.
okay. Let me think. I'm trying to think of what somebody would write about that, and then I got to read it.
We really just want to hear the voice,
see.
not so much the words.
Okay. Introducing our new mug, the Deck.
That's good.
That's excellent. Because I was curious. I was curious if you like, because my voice is rather nasally. So if I want to talk my radio voice, I have to change it a little bit. But I was interested to see if yours comes naturally. Do you have to change your voice at all, or if it's just like you just switch the tone a little bit? But it's you're blessed with like a rather it's your normal voice. You don't really have to change it. It seems.
More or less. I mean, what's funny is I found out that the more I relax, the easier it is. It's almost counterintuitive.
It's like Bruce Lee
If
said.
you were to try too much, you can see people when they try to do it, and they go, and they tighten up, and they go, like, well, no, that's not it. Right. That's not it.
Facts.
But yeah, I just found out that,
Here's what we're doing for
and a
the-
lot of it is from teaching.
Oh, that's very true. Yeah,
You know, you're presenting, you're presenting.
I was gonna say for Patreon content, me and CC are gonna get really drunk. We're gonna put random objects on the table, and we're gonna give corporate profiles for
can do that.
everyone.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
That would
That'd
be
be
a
a
blast.
lot of- that'd be a
that'd be
lot of
goofy,
fun.
man.
Yeah.
So CC, excellent, man. I think they say if you can last 2 years in a business, like
Right.
I think it's something like 30% of businesses will fail in the first 2 years. Close to 80 will fail before 5 years.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like 10 years is an accomplishment in its own. I think it can't ever be understated that I always appreciate, and I think Zane does as well, one, being a foreigner here starting a business is one thing, but introducing or taking a path that's not normal in the sense, like introducing an entirely different type of cuisine
Big facts.
is challenging. I think one of my final questions is, with Cajun cooking and New Orleans cooking being so different than anything you'll find even in America, do you think that being in Osaka there was a better chance of success because of like Osaka's connection to cooking culture or food culture? Like, do you think it would be you'd have just as much success if you were doing it somewhere else, or do you think Osaka maybe played a part in that, or maybe nothing at all? What do you think?
Well, Osaka definitely played a part, and I haven't spent an appreciable amount of time in Tokyo. And I know they don't have one there. They do have a restaurant there that serves Southern food. And we serve
not
some of the
specific,
same things. And I know the owners there, and we're friends. And there is a New Orleans restaurant in Okinawa. It's a former serviceman
American
there.
guy? Yeah, I was gonna say,
He was in the Navy, and he and I we haven't spoken yet, but we've communicated with each other, and our menus are not all the same, and that's fine. And there's even one here that's a little more Cajun. It's a small Japanese couple. It's a little tiny restaurant, and I've been there, but yeah, it's. I think that it's at least equal to what I might be able to do in Tokyo. And I say that I want to say that it's more advantageous. Tokyo has more access,
people.
right? But I think that navigating Tokyo can be, although I've never lived there, and I've never had any real appreciable visits, a couple of weddings, because I don't get to do anything. I'm running a business. But I would say that, given that what I'm working with here, it's definitely advantageous.
Right.
People come here, and I get a lot of people during holidays. They come in from Tokyo or Hiroshima or what have you, service people or people just traveling. And before COVID, it was always, I finally started to get into this rhythm where people would come, to Osaka from Tokyo or Hiroshima or other places. And then I would be on their to-do list.
That's dope.
The first 2
very
years,
cool.
it wasn't like that, because no one knew. No one really knew. And
You made the foodie tours. You're on the
Right.
list of the foodie tours.
So they're like, oh, yeah, we heard about your restaurant and we wanted to come because we're on vacation, when people would do the in-house vacations, in-state vacations.
Gotta be a good feeling, man.
So here's my last question.
Sure.
You got someone who's living overseas and they want to start a business in Japan. They want to come to Japan and kind of hustle like you did. What advice or a suggestion would you give them before coming to Japan?
Tips and tricks.
Yes.
Before they came here?
Yeah.
Well, know your craft. I mean, you're still going to learn. There's always something to learn. Even if you're, self or say quietly, oh, I got this. And then there's always something you go, oh, I didn't expect that.
Right. Facts.
And, you have to be humble enough to deal with it and be more along the lines of I mean, no, you can sit around and scream and curse, in a box. I've gone into my bathroom a few times and said a lot of words you don't want me to say here.
Yeah,
Right?
don't demonetize.
Start with M and F and S and right.
Of course.
But then you got to focus on the solution if there's a solution. You also have to say, well, I can't serve that, or I want to make this. And then the other thing is that sometimes people don't receive things kind of like you want them to. I have dishes that I love, and people love them. And then I've had, hey, I have that corn and crab bisque that you've been asking for. Oh, that's great. I'll have the gumbo today.
You're like, but I made it for you.
Right.
Come
on.
Me and Zane hit on this all the time, and I think every small business owner can relate. Where it's like, it's always interesting to see what you think is gonna be a hit. Like in your mind, you're like, no, this is it. This is the one, and you've got some other options. And then what actually is what people are interested in. That's always surprising. But you just saying know your craft is something that I think we haven't had some guests say before, and I think. Not only knowing what you do, but also not being willing to compromise.
Right.
Like you said, we're like, I'm not going to water down what I do and offer something that is not what I'm focused on.
Well, because that becomes, then it's about, you can say it's about survival, but really it's about, you're focusing on, you take too many shortcuts, and the next thing you know, you're not really going anywhere.
Right.
You haven't gone anywhere. You take this turn, you take this turn, you take this turn, and now
Back to square one.
where am I? Or I'm back here, or now I have to reinvent everything. And sometimes sometimes you just say, I can't serve this.
Right.
I went to one place. I'm sorry, I know we're running in short on time, but So I'll go to this party way before I thought about the restaurant, and they had a New Orleans brass band, and it felt like New Orleans. And the guy that ran the place, he normally served Japanese food, but he had been to New Orleans, and so he had crawfish, and he had boiled crawfish, and I was excited, and I went with a friend of mine, a Japanese woman I knew who had been in New Orleans, and I was excited, and the band was great, the drinks were great, and it was just like a New Orleans party. Down to some people dancing and drinking and falling down, and as long as they weren't dead, everybody kept going, and it's a thing.
Solid.
Right? That's a thing. So, so I went to go and get crawfish, and it was 500 yen for 5 crawfish that were cold.
It was per crawfish. I was like, oh my god.
Oh well, that's almost as bad.
Yeah.
That's almost as bad. I was like, 5 crawfish? Are you kidding me? I mean, when you go to a crawfish boil, they just spill it out. Or, you get
in a bucket.
Yeah. It's like, even if you're at a restaurant, which is kind of weird for, people from New Orleans, but whatever. I get it. But, it's a sizable amount. And they're not, believe it or not, I'm shocked they don't have them here in that regard, because they have all these abandoned rice fields. All you have to do is flood them and throw them out there. And they'll do fine all by themselves.
Yeah.
And then you can harvest them, but then I asked my wife what the deal was, because there's always a 3rd grade pet. And I'd see them, when I was teaching at first. And she says,
crawfish are pets.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, we have a pet crawfish at home. Right. Because my daughter's allergic to cats and dogs. But, so we have crawfish. But, it's a 3rd grade pet, and I asked my wife, and she says, oh, well, I think it was, for a while, it was a status thing. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, after the war, Japan was poor, and so people ate crawfish. And the crawfish that's here now is the one from Louisiana. Somehow people brought them over, and as they do, they escape, because, you can't eat them.
There's natural, but now there's crawfish populations in Japan?
Yeah, right in Yao.
I had no idea.
But they're not big enough. They're not farmed out enough, and they haven't spread enough at this point. But then people wouldn't eat them because that was poor people's food, probably in the 50s and 60s. People would harvest them and and eat them because people were poor. It was after the war.
Right.
And she said it became kind of a thing where no poor people eat that. But of course, knowing the history of food, poor people's food always ends up being some sort of
The best food. Ramen is poor people's food.
Well, right, but I mean, but look at have you seen the price of oxtails here?
No.
It's you don't need that, right?
But I did used to love oxtails.
Right, and they were cheap meat for
So this guy's serving you cold 500 yen crawfish, and that to you is cutting the corners.
He meant well, and he was like, "Hey, all right." And I said, "Okay." And then I realized, I said, well, I looked into getting crawfish, and it was just too expensive, and it just wasn't worth it.
Right.
In this case, everybody loses. I lose because I lose a little bit of my soul.
The image loses.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the customer loses.
Exactly. Right,
you don't really, this isn't really the experience.
Right. That you want from crawfish.
Right.
Because that itself is a unique.
Right.
Yeah. Like you said, crawfish boil is a unique experience in itself. So in that sense, it's important, like you said, learning to say, no, I'm not going to do this because
exactly
it's not true to what I want to do.
Right.
Bruce Lee says it best, and he's the theme for today. Just be like water. You feel me?
I thought it was crawfish was the theme.
No, you gotta be like water and adapt to your circumstances, man. And don't be all rigid.
Get drunk when you do corporate voiceovers and relax. Guys, thank you always. CC, thank you, my man. Absolute pleasure. I love crawfish. I love Cajun food, Creole food, New Orleans, gumbo. So I'm actually excited to say I can actually have I've had a lesson now. So viewers, guys, thank you always. If you want more content, check out our Patreon. You can find the link down in the contents below, the bio below. As always, thank you to Morisawa-san here at the deck. Thank you to our lovely audience joining us today. Producer Aaron Edge Wilderness, Hinomaru shirts. One more time, name of the New Orleans Bistro?
Bistro New Orleans.
Bistro New Orleans. Check out next time, guys. Peace.
West side of Japan, we out here coolin', ain't a nicer guy.